Life is like a hurricane here in Duckburg. Race cars, lasers, airplanes. It's a duck blur. Might solve a mystery or rewrite history. DuckTales, woo! DuckTales. Believe me, it hurts to stop right there because I want to sing the whole song. DuckTales was I absolutely love DuckTales. Huge part of my childhood, early childhood, because DuckTales, the original run was from 87 to 90, so it made it all the way up to 90. I'm pretty sure they're in the drug crossover. I think so. The big 80s Saturday morning drug crossover. I'm pretty sure they're in that. DuckTales. Some of my earliest memories, because like I said, 87. I'm born in 86, so early childhood memories of DuckTales. One of my earliest memories is seeing the movie in theaters. I was one of those kids who saw Treasure of the Lost Lamp in theaters in 1990. That's a thing that happened. And I remember basically wondering, like, why are there no, like, we're going to get a bunch of these, right? Like, they're going to keep coming out with DuckTale movies. That's the only one. That's the only DuckTale movie we ever got for a theatrical release. One of my earliest memories, I don't even remember how old I am, but is I had a Jell-O mold that had it was Huey, Louie, and Dewey. It had all three. It had the three brothers, and I remember making Jell-O as a kid and being very proud and happy that I got to use my Jell-O mold with Huey, Dewey, and Louie. I don't even think they make Jell-O molds anymore. They really should. It was fun. And I've actually thought back at, like, what happened to Jell-O mold. Did it disintegrate because it was cheap plastic? Did it, did my mom toss it out? Like, I don't know what happened to that Jell-O mold. But it is one of my earliest memories as regards to just earliest memories as a human being, let alone Saturday morning cartoons and DuckTales and all that. Another, like, early memory was trying to collect all the Disney figures that came in the cereal boxes. I forget which cereal, but there was like a Baloo from Tailspin, Chip and Dale from Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers. I forget all of them. But it was that Saturday morning, or that afternoon block, the Disney afternoon, and it these things stick with you. I'm 30 plus years, almost 40, and I still remember getting that little figure out of the cereal box. It's amazing how those things still stick with you. The early Tailspin or DuckTales stuff was you know, a little bit more broader, a little bit, you know, I enjoyed it. I mostly remember the movie, and I enjoyed DuckTales. But I was much more a Darkwing Duck kid. Like, Darkwing Duck comes along when I'm a little bit older, a little bit more, like, that hits a sweet spot for me as far as superheroes and pulp adventure, and I still enjoy Darkwing Duck to this day. So I'm looking at the voice cast. I didn't realize Frank Welker was a voice on the original DuckTales. Good for him. But yeah, like, you know, Alan Young as Scrooge McDuck, like, that was my Scrooge McDuck for, like, you know, he was the guy for decades upon decades, not just this show, but anytime Scrooge would show up in a movie, it was voiced by Alan Young until his passing. You know, and that, like, you know, Alan Young was brilliant as Scrooge McDuck. His, you know, if you're unfamiliar with Alan Young, he was the original voice of the talking horse in Mr. Ed, all the way back then. You know, one of the earliest voice actors, and, you know, worked all the way up until literally he died. The DuckTales comic, or the DuckTales TV show, was heavily inspired by the Duck universe, mostly created by Carl Barks. Carl Barks is a hero of mine, somebody whom I look up to as a cartoonist. Carl Barks was this animator who worked really well with Disney, worked on several classic Donald Duck shorts, you know, really developed the nephews and that sort of thing. And then basically he you know, back then what would happen was a company would license Disney characters, or, you know, to do a comic book. Like, we're going to pay you either a percentage, or we're going to pay you an upfront fee so we can publish, you know, a comic book with Mickey Mouse, or these other characters, and we're going to still make money because Mickey Mouse is going to sell much more than if we had created our own character. And so I forget the publishing company, but they licensed, you know, basically all the Duck characters, and Carl Barks was one of a few animators who went over there to help the comic book company basically stay on model, and he liked the scheduling a lot better working for the comic book company. I think it was Key. I'm not, don't quote me on that. I don't remember who the original Duck publishers were, but basically he helped flush out, because it was a third party deal. He wasn't necessarily being watched by, like, Disney editorial real tightly, and he was able to flush out this world of, like, you know, he created Scrooge McDuck, he created a huge number of characters and mythology and lore, and you know, he created one of the greatest adventure comics of all time, because Scrooge McDuck was this adventurer, and Gladstone Gander's one of my favorite characters. I don't know if Carl Barks created him, but it's that universe where Gyro, Gear Loose, and all these crazy things could happen. And Carl Barks, he lived in a small town called Hemet, California, where I currently live. It's a shame. One of the things that really bothers me is there's not a museum out here to Carl Barks. There should be. I live 2 hours away from Disney. I think a little more for Burbank, where the actual studio is. I've only been out there once. Disney, if you want me to come out there, I'll come out there again. I really will. But that sounded more like a threat than please hire me. But I know his commute. I understand when he had to come to the office. I know the roads that he drove. Like Carl Barks, huge influence on me and a lot of artists. Indiana Jones wouldn't happen without Carl Barks. George Lucas and Spielberg both pointed to those comics as huge influences on the tone and what they wanted from Indiana Jones, because they're adventure stories straight up. They're not super heroic. They're not, but they're adventures. There's romance. There's all this just rich lore that Carl Barks created. And then basically the way Disney operated then was he liked to create the illusion that Disney, that Walt actually drew everything or was behind everything. So Walt, the Disney Corporation, had this policy of not crediting people on licensed property or even licensed property. There was, Walt knew who did what, and that was good enough for him. But the general public, there was this, I went many years as a young kid not knowing Walt wasn't really an artist. There was this other guy, Iwerks, who drew all the Mickey shorts, Walt wasn't I'm sure he enjoyed art, and he fell into this position where he was having to oversee everything, but really Walt was much better at it as an idea guy than anyone ever was as far as an art. He invented the multiplane camera. He invented all this kind of stuff. He was a major problem solver. I don't know if he was really any good as an artist. I've never seen any Walt original art. I know he would tear apart a storyboard sequence, but maybe I should try to see if there is any actual Walt Disney artwork that is actually by him. But anyway, these comic books, these artists weren't allowed to get credit. So Carl Barks would usually sneak in a little sketch of a dog somewhere in his books. So that's how we know which books he drew. But before we knew his name, he was amongst the fan community known as the Good Duck Artist. There was one artist above everybody else who really knew how to draw these characters and really get into it and bring life and action and knew what he was doing, and that was the Good Duck Artist. And in the 70s, there was this, finally this fan push to figure out who this guy was and where he came from. And it turned out to be a big deal because later on in life, Carl Barks made a really good living doing commissions. A lot of comic book artists now just, guess what? You can hop on Twitter and be like, hey, I'd like to pay you to draw or paint X, Y, and Z. Or you can go to a comic book convention and be like, hey, I'd like a sketch or something. I've been fortunate enough to get a couple from artists whom I really love and admire. But, back then it was a little harder to contact these artists. But the fandom and there was such a fandom around Carl Barks that the last part of his life he made really good money doing these incredible paintings of Donald Duck and the family and Scrooge McDuck, and recreating some of his more famous or iconic scenes from the comics. Even the Disney Corporation would say, hey, would you paint us this piece so we can use it as a print to celebrate this anniversary? Or he, near the end of his career, he was very much in demand. And that's not how the majority of these stories go. The majority of these stories is artist X shows up, hits real big, does something incredible, makes the company a lot of money, and then is forgotten about and relegated to history, and late in life has to beg somebody for health insurance. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, the creators of Superman, were suing for health insurance near the end of their lives. So that's normally how this story goes. But the fact that Carl Barks, near the end of his career, was still able to provide a living as an artist and was still such in demand, is something that inspires me. That I think, maybe I can make a living doing this well into my 80s. It's Carl Barks is a huge inspiration to me as a cartoonist, and he created the perfect sandbox for everything that he loved. And it's kind of what I did with my Duck comic, Flatfoot McGee. I created the perfect sandbox for everything I love. It's more noir, it's darker, it's there's hints of old Hollywood. It's the send up of the 1950s detective. That's my sandbox. That's the stuff I really love. And yeah, it's a Duck comic. So I can't help but be inspired by the good Duck artist, Carl Barks. Even though I was more Who Framed Roger Rabbit was another huge influence on me growing up. But yeah, Carl Barks, the DuckTales universe is amazing. It ran till 1990, and then 91 is when we get Darkwing Duck, who I just found out was named by Batman the Animated Series producer Alan Barnett. Alan Barnett actually came up with the name of Darkwing Duck. There was when he was at Disney, there was a contest amongst the employees to create the name for Darkwing Duck, and as he was leaving to go off to Warner Brothers Animation, he threw it out there and Darkwing was selected, and he got a little bonus, hopefully. I believe, yeah, he got a bonus check, and then, went on to do, incredible things with Batman. But, yeah, Darkwing was something that hit that pulp niche for me early on, and it was kind of like a gateway to pulp superhero adventure. It wasn't the Spirit, it wasn't the Phantom, it wasn't the Shadow, but it had all these elements, and I was like, as I got older, I was like, oh, that's where they got that. Oh, that's where they got that. So Darkwing was a huge influence on me. And then I have to say the 2017 DuckTales reboot series is absolutely beautiful. It is everything you want in a cartoon. It is gorgeous. I have watched the hour-long pilot multiple times. This is a series who I didn't have cable when it was coming out, and it was, Hey there, people of the interwebs. Quick ad break here real quick. If you want to support me or any of the art, or even get original art, please go to patreon.com/Destiny Comics, where you can get original art, sketches, early access to the videos, podcasts, as well as early access to the web comics. All and everything is at patreon.com/Destiny Comics. I think it might have been streaming on Disney XD or whatever, one of the sub streamers. But I didn't have, so I was paying for it on iTunes. I paid for the entire series as it was coming out. Like, I put my money on the table. Like, this is a show that I wanted every episode as it was coming out. David Tennant blew me away as Scrooge. They did the unthinkable by giving Huey, Dewey, and Louie all different voice actors, giving each of them their own personality versus, a palette swap of the same character. The inclusion of Donald, whereas Donald was not on the original series, because he's in the first episode of the original series briefly, like, oh, Scrooge, you have to take care of my nephews because he's going off to the Navy or something of that effect. But the inclusion of Donald was brilliant, and then they created real issues with Donald and Scrooge, and then it's revealed, like, in end of season 2 or I forget what episode, that Scrooge is the reason why Della, isn't around, the boys' mother. And so, like, it was soap opera, but at the same time, it was, everything about those older Carl Barks comics, but upped. Like, they took everything and they upped it, and then they played with everything from that early Saturday morning lineup was fair game. There's an episode called Double O Duck, where that's a reference to an older episode in the original series that was that got the Darkwing Duck spinoff going. But we get to see an origin for Chippendale Rescue Rangers. We get to, they reimagined Darkwing and Negaduck, who, by the way, I have statues of in my living room. I have 2 statues of they're the same figure, but just I have a Darkwing Duck and a Negaduck on top of my TV. Little things like that make me smile. I also have a flash and a reverse flash up there. But it's the ducks that make me happy. You know, we in the third season we got a Goofy cameo. You know, that flat out references Goof Troop. I mean, that series from, you know, 2017 to 2021 was a highlight for me. It really was. And it really helped me during the pandemic, because lockdown and all that stuff. You know, you go stir crazy, or, you know, it gave me something to look forward to during some of that time. And I rewatched the reboot more often than I care to admit. I feel like not being a part of this show as a, you know, storyboard artist is a failure of mine, because I wanted nothing more than to work on this show when it was out. Truly, this show was absolutely inspiring. This show was stunning. I fell in love with everything that they did in this show. You know, it was just brilliant. You know, Donald being friends with Storkules, and they tie in the Greek gods, and, you know, they even go back and tie into the lamp and the genie. There's an episode in season 3 that goes back and pays homage to the movie that I first referenced earlier. You know, they you know, not only hit on a lot of the Carl Barks stuff, but Don Rosa, who came after Carl Barks and picked up that torch and wrote and drew one of the best graphic novels of all time, The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck. There's actually a documentary about Don Rosa and his impact on Donald Duck and the DuckTales, and you know, again, he's a bit of a cranky old man, but I'm 40 and I'm a cranky old man, so like I see exactly where he's coming from. And Don Rosa is you know, all that Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck stuff was beautifully adapted. You know, the going back to the, you know, Scrooge's early days, not just from, you know, all that stuff was just beautifully adapted. If you've never read Don Rosa, Don Rosa's Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck, pick it up. It's worth the read. And it's some of the most beautiful duck art you'll ever see. And it's brilliant comic book storytelling. It's a masterclass. It's, you know, I put Carl Barks and Don Rosa up there with Neil Adams, as far as, like, you know, and Will Eisner is, you know, best storytelling stellars in the history of this industry. So yeah, again, the DuckTales, huge influence on me. When they did the reboot in 2017, they didn't have to do this, but in the background you could see the publishing dots as if it was a comic book. And that always, like, it just made me feel so good that something I loved and something that really moved me was being treated with respect by somebody within the Disney Corporation, because a lot of times the things that I love don't get loved by their corporate overlords. So it was really good to see, for those years that we had the reboot, this be taken very serious and be treated. And we got within the reboot, we got several little mini movies, because there's the pilot, and then there's Invasion Day, and then there's the Darkwing Duck special, that act as their own little mini movies within the 3 seasons that we got. So yeah, and it I have a poster from the IDW comic book line sitting around my office that needs to get framed, because it's just something that makes me smile. And that's the kind of stuff that I keep in my office, stuff that makes me smile, if it doesn't inspire me, it doesn't make me smile, or it's not, material as far as painting or art stuff, it doesn't hang out in the office. This is my creative space, and I want to be surrounded by stuff that makes me want to create. And the DuckTales reboot was definitely something that made me want to create. So yeah, absolutely love DuckTales. I didn't even mention the video game. I've spent hours upon hours. I only have the Game Boy version. I don't have the NES cartridge, but I have spent many hours jumping with Scrooge McDuck's cane upon enemies and collecting the diamonds and gold and all that stuff. Digital treasures. But do yourself a favor, go back and pick up some of these, the Carl Barks collections, or the Don Rosa stuff. It's just good comic book stuff, and it's brilliant, storytelling. There are several episodes that I go back to concerning the reboot. Mostly the pilot, because I think the pilot is brilliant. And some of the Double O Duck episode makes me cry every time. So, yeah. With that said, if you enjoy what we're doing here on Saturday Morning Cartooning, like, subscribe, comment. If you really like what we're doing here, hop up on my Patreon, where you can get these videos early. And if you really like what we're doing here, go to the website, buy one of my books, buy Flatfoot McGee, or one of my horror comic collections, or heaven forbid you go out and you buy my novel. I actually wrote a book without words, or with words, without pictures. So yeah, thank you. Hope you enjoy what we're doing here, and yeah. Woohoo! So this, there you have it. Another one in the can. Please like and subscribe. DuckTales had, especially in the 80s, had some of the weirdest um, licensed, because I'm not just talking toys. I distinctly remember having a Jello mold in the shape of the DuckTales characters. It was like three. I think it was Huey, Dewey, and Louie. All the two of them smaller. But I had this giant. As a child of the '80s, we had a giant Jello mold of the DuckTales. So in the comments, what's the weirdest DuckTales item, or even Saturday morning cartoon item that you remember?